Hey guys, Cody here with Mercury Rising Astrology. On Friday, February 14th, Mercury will ingress from Aquarius into the sign of Pisces. And so it's a pretty big vibe shift. We've got Mercury moving from a fixed masculine air sign ruled by Saturn to a mutable feminine water sign ruled by Jupiter. So I wanted to go over, some of the themes that you might expect with Mercury in Pisces. And then later on in the video, I will go over each rising sign and what Mercury's transits through Pisces will mean for you. So let's jump into it. So Mercury's journey through Pisces isn't quite a cakewalk. Mercury is what we call in fall and in detriment in the sign of Pisces, ruling Virgo and being exalted in Virgo. When Mercury is in Pisces, it's the furthest away from home that it can be. And not only that, being in its fall, it feels a little bit depressed or a little bit more challenged in trying to effectuate the desires of its agenda. And so, it can be a little bit challenging, but it's also a really fascinating transit because it takes the kind of logic and mentality of Mercury and puts it in a place of imagination, intuition, creativity, dreaminess, sensitivity, and emotions. We just kind of need to be mindful about, some things can get foggy or scattered or be emotionally charged or hard to kind of communicate and grasp. But I'm going to break this down really quick. We're going to go through the themes of Mercury, generally speaking. Then we're going to go through the themes of Pisces and kind of the environment that Pisces provides for Mercury to do its job. And then I want to talk about the themes that, you might encounter with Mercury and Pisces. And then I'll go through the rising signs. So first up, Mercury, all about communication, all about thinking, the exchange of ideas, gathering new information, connecting the dots, disseminating information. It's like Mercury wants to connect things. In ancient myth, Mercury or Hermes was associated with the psychopomp, being able to traverse the realms of the divine, the earthly, and the underworld, and being able to move between them, carrying messages and souls across the boundaries of each. So it governs how we talk, how we write, how we learn, how we solve problems. It's the brain power planet out of all the other planets. It's our conversations, our decisions, our intellectual pursuits. Mercury's playful though, he's curious, and there's a light-hearted kind of dynamic to Mercury as well. When Mercury is well placed, things run smoothly, communication is clear, learning is straightforward and easy, the information is straightforward and clear. But when he's not in his element, kind of like in Pisces, things can get a little tricky, messages can get scrambled, information can be scattered, we can be easily confused or overly romanticize or idealize things and not have a logical, like concrete plan to implement our ideas. And plans and ideas can change unexpectedly when Mercury's not really doing its best. In Pisces is a mutable water sign, feminine, ruled by Jupiter. It's dreamy, it's imaginative, and it's deeply emotional. Think intuition, empathy, connections to the unseen, that gut feeling, the creativity. It's an artistic, creative, romantic sign. It's a sign where boundaries of reality kind of dissolve a little bit and everything flows and merges and blurs together, which can be very creative and very liberating in a sense in terms of allowing things to free flow and kind of free associate. Jupiter's rulership of Pisces brings an expansiveness and optimism and an encouraging of exploration of spiritual beliefs or dreams, higher truths, or emotional kind of realms. With water being the element of Pisces, this operates through more feelings than logic. So that kind of adds attention to Mercury's transit through the sign, especially because Mercury is associated with the intellect. Pisces is all about going with the flow, embracing fluidity, seeing the world through a kind of poetic or rose-colored lens, so to speak. The key qualities of Pisces include things like compassion, empathy, imagination, creativity, artistic inspiration. The shadow side can kind of be escapism, delusions, lack of structure, lack of clarity, or emotional overwhelm, or overly sensitive to emotional reactions. When Mercury is transiting through Pisces, the logic and intellect side of Mercury doesn't quite know what to do in the mystical, creative, free flowing world of Pisces. So that's why Mercury is in its detriment and its fall, because it doesn't really play to Mercury's natural strengths when it's in Pisces. Mercury likes facts, it likes clear communication, it likes analysis, it likes putting things in their proper order. But Pisces prefers a more intuitive, feeling, symbolistic, an approach more rooted in symbolism than like concrete, like tidbits and facts. And so this creates a disconnect where Mercury struggles a little bit to function as he would normally like to in Pisces. Now, this brings some strengths, and some of those strengths means, are along the lines of creativity and intuitive insights. You might find that your imagination is on fire, making this an excellent time for art, music, any kind of creative projects, storytelling, creative writing, exploring mystical, mental realms, that kind of like artsy, kind of bohemian quality. Even spiritual exploration, maybe undertaking, new spiritual tasks or new spiritual insights or endeavors. Some of the challenges we'll find with Mercury in Pisces is that clear communication can be a little hard to come by. Things can feel scattered, overly emotional, unclear, nebulous, hard to put into words. Like you have all these symbols and these feelings and these impressions, but you can't quite articulate them. There might be some misunderstandings that happen a little bit more frequently. You might feel a little bit foggy or distracted in the mental realm, and it might be easy to get a little bit lost in daydreams or overly emotional thinking. With Mercury and Pisces, there's a tendency to think with our heart, not just our head. And this can be beautiful in a lot of ways, and you can imagine that, but it can also be a little bit disorienting if you have practical, of this world kind of tangible matters to attend to. Some ways that Mercury and Pisces could manifest in everyday life through this transit is like creative breakthroughs. This great time for artists and writers and creatives that might experience a surge of inspiration or creative juice, and maybe feel a little bit more connected to their dream world or their higher ideals and their kind of like creative aspirations. It can also lend itself to compassionate communication. So you might find yourself drawn to really deep, meaningful, emotional conversations that draw you into a realm that's a little bit more spiritual and romantic. Great time to deeply express yourself in a way that's heartfelt and in tune with the deeper senses of yourself. There might be more spiritual insights. You might find yourself more attuned to things like meditation, prayer, spiritual practices, or just have like maybe deep, powerful spiritual revelations during this time, otherworldly kind of influences on your mind and the way you think. Now, it will bring some challenges as well because Mercury is in its detriment and its fall throughout the sign of Pisces. And so sometimes clear communication and messages can get distorted or lost. You might find yourself saying one thing but meaning another thing, or being misunderstood, or not being able to quite articulate the vision that you have in a way that's clear and that other people can understand. You might be misunderstanding other people, perhaps even. And again, there might be the sense of a mental fog. Staying focused on one task at a time can maybe be a little bit difficult, especially, if you're working on a project that requires focus and like a linear process. When Mercury's in Pisces, Mercury likes to free flow and connect and kind of like go with the whims of feeling. And so you might feel a little bit overwhelmed by details, or you might be distracted by emotions. Your thinking might be a little bit clouded by emotions. And during this time as well, it's easy to spiral into fantasies and daydreams. This is good for creativity and it's good for, artistic pursuits. But if you're not in a creative space or an artistic space, it's easy to let those fantasies spiral. This can also lead to a tendency to be overly fearful, and daydream about potential anxieties and fears that come up and let those things spiral and kind of making you worry about things that aren't real or don't really necessarily have tangible real world effects. So some examples, you might find yourself writing a heartfelt email that gets misinterpreted, or like you might be dating somebody and you send a text message trying to express your feelings and it just quite doesn't quite land how it's supposed to, or it causes some kind of confusion. Or you might be working on a task and then you look off out the window and you find yourself daydreaming for 15, 20 minutes about this project, and then you realize that the deadline is like 5 minutes away, or you missed the deadline. But on the bright side, you might have a spiritual breakthrough in a creative process. And when you're daydreaming, you can allow your mind to kind of breathe, and you might find creative solutions, or you might have a new, profound sort of inspiration towards something that you've been working on and that's been stuck. So it's not all doom and gloom, but there's definitely some challenges that come along with Mercury and Pisces, especially if you're not in a space or an environment where you can take your time, you can be emotionally in tuned, you can let the creative juices flow, and things are a little bit more, rigid and rational and kind of linear. It'll be kind of a challenge as Mercury's in Pisces. So that's kind of what I've got for Mercury's transit through Pisces. I'm going to go through each of the rising signs now and kind of give you a look at where these themes might show up for you most, depending on the rising sign of your chart. All right, we're going to start off with Aries Rising. For my Aries Rising, this is happening in your 12th house of hidden matters, dreams, subconscious patterns, self-undoing, things that are hard for the native to see or that draws us away from ourselves. So you might find yourself feeling a little bit more introspective and drawn to mental rest or spiritual reflection. Pay attention during this time to what's coming up in your dreams or your intuition. That can kind of point to things in our waking life that needs to be addressed or needs to be looked at. The theme here is mostly that mental clarity may be a little elusive for you, may be hard to kind of get a grip on what your mind is doing, what your thoughts are doing, and where they're running off to. But it's a great time to recharge and explore spiritual practices, maybe reflecting on your subconscious patterns and the way you're thinking and the way you can kind of undermine yourself sometimes with your mental pursuits, your mental constructs. You might experience vivid dreams during this time that offer insight to any kind of problems that you're going through. A creative idea could come to you during meditation or when you're drawn away from the world. And you might be a little bit more sensitive to the emotional undercurrents of things, and you might not be quite 100% aware of where that's coming from. So if an emotional undercurrent is kind of coming up for you and it feels unsettling or uncomfortable in your mind, just give yourself some time to pause and reflect on that and kind of tune in to your inner world and kind of see what's being pointed at for you, because this could actually help you heal old wounds. There's a sense of surrender and letting go with the 12th house. So allowing yourself to just kind of not necessarily let this transit take you, but surrender to the process and understand that when Mercury moves out of Pisces and into the first house in Aries, some of the things that were coming up for you during Mercury's transit through Pisces may be a little bit more apparent and a little bit more obvious and make a little bit more sense. For my Taurus risings, this is happening in your 11th house of alliances, social networks, goals and aspirations, and friendships. So that area of life is going to come into focus for you. You might connect with old friends or feel inspired to dream up new future plans. Your aspirations may, take a more dreamy, romantic, kind of idealized quality during this time. You might find yourself, working on collaborative projects that thrive in a creative, imaginative, or artistic environment, but you might suffer from logistical issues in this area if you take on any kind of collaborative projects, or there might be some kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding between your friend groups or the groups that you associate yourself with. But ultimately, this could take on the effect of like an old friend reaches out unexpectedly, and you have a meaningful conversation that kind of draws, in spiritual elements or a deep emotional connection. Or you might feel inspired during this time to join or lead a group project that champions a cause that you feel deeply passionate about on an emotional level. But just be mindful during this time that miscommunication during any kind of group planning or event planning might kind of, throw in some roadblocks or some minor setbacks for you. For my Gemini risings, this is happening in your 10th house of career, public image, reputation. So these themes are going to be highlighted for you. You might feel inspired by new career visions, or, you might find yourself kind of mentally scattered at work, or finding it hard to stay organized, or communicating your plans clearly at work. So be mindful how you present yourself. Confusion can arise in these areas, but you might also take on a creative project at work. You might get a chance to, if you're normally, doing something that's logical and kind of like mundane or linear, you might find yourself working on something that's a little bit more free flow, a little bit more creative. Maybe you have to put together a presentation that you normally don't have to do, and you get to think outside of the box a little bit. But just be mindful of kind of the potential for, having to revise things or do things over a little bit, or take your time due to vague instructions or miscommunications. You might be drawn during this time to explore more meaningful career paths, or something that is more aligned with your spiritual beliefs or your emotional sensitivities. And you might have conversations with superiors sometimes that might be a little bit emotionally charged, or need and require a little bit more sensitivity in terms of the emotional department. For my Cancer risings, this is happening in your 9th house of travel, higher education, philosophy, religion. So this area is going to be activated for you during this transit. You might feel drawn to explore new philosophies or revisit past studies, perhaps. You might find yourself drawn to studying, spiritual text or religious text, or you might find yourself traveling to a place that feels, in alignment with your spirituality, or, you might be traveling to a place that unlocks a part of your big picture worldview that wasn't quite there before, that allows you to see the world in a more, whole and compassionate and empathetic way. It's a great transit to expand your worldview and to expand kind of, again, your spiritual perspective of the world and how you're interacting with it. But because it rules travel, and Mercury also rules travel, and it's in detriment in fall, travel plans may face delays, or there might be miscommunications or setbacks when you're traveling. So be mindful of that. And again, kind of go with the flow and allow the process to unfold. You might find yourself enrolling in a spiritual or creative course, or, unclear itineraries with your travel plans, or just gaining deep philosophical insights through conversations with mentors or church figures or people that you look up to from a spiritual perspective. For my Leo risings, this is happening in your 8th house of intimacy, transformation, shared resources, debt. These things will take center stage during this transit, and this might lead to emotional conversations that deepen relationships, but also bring up perhaps buried fears or anxieties. This is a time to handle sensitive topics, especially money and feelings and intimacy, with care. These things might feel a little bit heavier than usual, and your mental state might be drawn to those areas a little bit more than normal. But this could easily be like a deep heart-to-heart with a partner that, uncovers emotional truths that have been hidden, whether for positive or for negative. You might find yourself reflecting on, joint finances or resources or your debts, or maybe reorganizing your debts and investments in a way that's a little bit more aligned with your spiritual and emotional kind of needs. And you might even have a sudden, interest in psychological or spiritual transformation or process. You might find yourself looking, one of the books that comes to mind is like the attachment theory books. You might find yourself, studying attachment theory and how different types of attachments are drawn to each other and why that is. And so that's kind of some of the themes that you can expect for Leo rising. For Virgo rising, this is happening in your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, business partnerships, commitments. So communication with loved ones may become a little bit more emotional, or a little bit more romantic or symbolic or sensitive and intuitive, but be mindful during this time for misunderstandings. And understand that like allowing people to express themselves from a heartfelt way and expressing yourself from your heart and in a way that's in tune with yourself emotionally can strengthen connections. So you this might lead to things like a miscommunication with a partner or a colleague that leads to a deeper emotional conversation that reveals things that maybe were underneath the surface the whole time. You might be inspired to create poetry as an expression of love towards your loved ones, or old relationship patterns may surface, and those might need to be healed and looked at and reflected on so that they can be let go of or transformed into something that's a little bit more healthy in the future. For my Libra risings, this is happening in your sixth house of illness, routines, and work life. So these areas will take priority. This is a difficult house, and you might feel a little bit overwhelmed by tasks. You might find yourself maybe focused on your health or worrying about your health in some way. But you might also be inspired to bring creativity into your daily routine, into your health routines. You might experiment with a new, workout routine that feels a little bit more. Maybe you've been lifting weights and now you do yoga or something like that. Stay grounded during this time. It's easy to lose track of practical matters with Mercury in its detriment and its fall. So just take time to ground. Make sure that your plans and your everyday routines are kind of structured in a way that allows for flexibility, but can also stay on track and you don't get taken off track. You might find yourself, making your workspace a little bit more aesthetically pleasing or emotionally in tune with your work. You might find yourself, with creative problem solving breakthroughs while you're at work, or you might be letting your intuition guide your health and wellness decisions. Again, you might choose to switch up whether it's your diet or your exercise or some of your routines to something that something that feels a little bit more intuitively connected to what you need right now and in this moment. And maybe even there's a spiritual element wrapped up in that as well. For my Scorpio risings, this is happening in your fifth house of creativity, romance, and children and playfulness, things that bring us pleasure. It's a great time for artistic projects. It's a great time for, maybe sitting down, if you have kids, sitting down with kids and your children and doing art projects or some kind of creative project. If you have a romantic partnership or you're dating, communication during this time could feel a little strained or a little confusing, so be patient with that. Embrace creativity during this time and don't let daydreams kind of take over reality. The fifth house is the joy of Venus, and we can have a tendency to overindulge when things are in the fifth house. So be creative, but don't get swept up too much in the romanticism and the dreams and the illusions of Pisces, and just make sure that you're staying grounded in reality. You might start a new creative project during this time that allows yourself a little bit more creative freedom, a little bit more flow. You might find a romantic partner that is, giving you mixed signals, and you have to navigate that with an emotional compassion and set clear boundaries amidst the miscommunications. But ultimately, playfulness and imagination can infuse your free time or your time with loved ones or your children. For my Sagittarius risings, this is happening in your fourth house of home and family and emotional security or foundations. So this might be a time where you reflect on your roots and your relationship with family members and what home is. And there might be, deep emotional conversations that you have around home and family, but clarity may be a little harder to find. If you work through it and go with it, there might be a sense of healing through the miscommunications and through the deep emotional conversations that might come up as well. This might be a family member or a parent sharing an emotional story that shifts your perspective about your relationship to them and where they're coming from, and it ultimately deepens or strengthens your bonds. This could mean that you just feel inspired to redecorate or reorganize your home for allowing more comfort and more creativity, and maybe you set up an altar in your house for religious devotion or spiritual devotion of some kind as well. Emotional memories from your childhood or from your family patterns could emerge during this time and spark, again, conversations or feelings that need to be explored and dug up and uncovered and perhaps let go of and healed, so that how you relate to your family and how your family relates to you, and how we think about family and parents and home that might be kind of shifting and might be kind of unclear and might need some exploring. Again, perfect time to reflect and kind of look at those kind of themes and see how a shift in perspective can be a little bit beneficial for them. For my Capricorn risings, this is happening in your third house of environment, communication, learning, local connections. So this area is going to be emphasized for you. You might feel really scattered. You might feel that conversations aren't going quite like they were supposed to. They might be going off in unexpected directions. But this can lead to like new insights and revelation in the process as well. Be clear with your words and what you're saying. Double check important messages. Make sure you lock your door when you leave the house. Make sure you got your seatbelt on. Make sure you got gas in the car. Like, just double check important, everyday things. Some of the things that can come up during this time for you, you might have a creative writing project that takes off, but requires careful editing. Maybe you just did like a stream of consciousness type of writing exercise, and now at some point you're going to have to go back and edit it. You might reconnect with a sibling, or a neighbor through a deep emotional conversation, or a shift in insight and perspective that allows you to get to know them on a more deeper emotional and spiritual level. And you might find yourself involved with a community project, or something involved in your community that brings compassion and understanding and empathy, but there might be a miscommunication or a difficulty staying on track completing that project as well, again, due to Mercury's detriment and fall in Pisces. For my Aquarius risings, this is happening in your second house of finances, money, possession, resources, and self-worth. So this area will take focus for you. You might experience changes in your income or spending habits, or your values might be, going through a moment of redefinition. I would avoid any kind of financial impulsivity during this time, and make sure that any kind of intuitive spending that you are doing is grounded in a reality, grounded in a budget. You might be realigning how you spend your money and your resources to something that's more spiritually fulfilling or emotionally aligned. But with Jupiter ruling Pisces and being a mutable water sign, just be mindful of like scattered expenses or spending money unnecessarily. You might have a sudden desire to invest in some kind of creative project or a spiritual enterprise, but again, make sure you're not just acting on a whim. You might reflect on whether or not your spending habit aligns with your deeper values. Might be a great time to go over, your budget and what you're spending money on, and do you really need it? What does it say about your values if you spend money on it, and where do I need to realign my spending to better reflect what I value? And your income sources might shift during this time. You might have to reassess your financial security in some sense, with Mercury representing movement and change, and Pisces being a Jupiter ruled mutable sign, like shifts and movement and resources and a reassessment of financial security could be a highlight for this period for you. And lastly, but never least, we've got Pisces rising. This will be happening directly to you, very personal, in your first house. So your identity, your self-expression, who you are, mental clarity might be in flux. All of these things might be changing and might be in flux, and you might feel deeply inspired to pursue, your dreams and a romanticized version of your life and what you are. But you might also be really emotionally sensitive during this time. You might be exceptionally porous to other people's feelings and impressions. And so be mindful to, create boundaries where necessary and ground things into reality where necessary. It's a great time to lean into creativity and your intuition and your spiritual side. Just be mindful that it's rooted in something concrete as well. You might feel called to reinvent yourself or express your identity through art, fashion, a new creative project. You might, be wearing your heart on your sleeve, so to speak, during this time. The emotional sensitivity might make you more attuned to others. You might be able to pick up on subtleties that other people may often miss during this time, but you might also be a little bit more prone, because of that sensitivity, to take things a little bit more personally. So be careful when people, say things or do things and you're picking up on this undercurrent. Try not to take everything so personally, like give it a step back and maybe give people the benefit of the doubt. And you might also experience deep emotional or powerful spiritual insights during this time that shift how you perceive yourself and your identity and how you're expressing and how you're showing up in the world as well. So keep an eye out for kind of some of those themes as well for my Pisces rising. So there you have it. Mercury will be in Pisces from February 14th to March 3rd, before he moves into Aries. It'll eventually turn retrograde and move back into Pisces, but that's a different video. I'll go over the retrograde when it happens. Um, so yeah, during this time, Mercury in Pisces, great for creative endeavors, great for, getting in tune with your intuition and deeper emotional values, spiritual practices, spiritual perspectives, allowing yourself to free flow creatively and mentally. Not so much a good time for clear communication or easily articulated words and ideas. There might be some miscommunications. You might feel a little bit more brain foggy, a little bit more distracted than normal. But ultimately, I think with Mercury's transit through Pisces, we're going to get in touch with something a little bit higher than ourselves, a little bit otherworldly. And that can, even for a brief moment, if it's distracting or foggy, or we daydream or idealize or get lost in the sauce, ultimately there's going to be something there after Mercury's transit through Pisces that really allows us to touch something a little bit deeper and touch something a little bit bigger that we can bring into our everyday lives in a way that's more profound, more compassionate, more empathetic, more creative, more inspired. So it's not all doom and gloom. I just like to point out the struggles that we'll go through, but those struggles, if we face them with, a sense of surrender and gratitude and faith and understanding, I think those struggles can actually point to and lead us to a more deep understanding and a more profound wisdom that we can take with us moving forward. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you like this content, give this video a like, it helps. Comment below on which house Pisces rules for you and how you expect this to manifest for you if you're starting to see it during the, Mercury's transit through Pisces. And if you want more of this astrological content, follow my page, subscribe, it really helps. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.